So I'll start with just sharing a bit about Quasar. So Quasar was kind of like intended to be like a perplexity for astronomy kind of thing. So basically, I could take together a bunch of open source LLMs or other closed source LLMs and build a harness around it, and that could help with kind of connecting with most of the archives. So initially, when it started, the intent was it only kind of interacted with the ALMA archive, and it could fetch any kind of data or kind of any information related to ALMA. And people could ask questions in natural language, and it could get you those answers, relevant answers, concrete answers from the archive. So that's how we started, and we already published a paper on the Stanford conference on physics and AI. And the way this Quasar works is it's pretty simple. So the first step is that user asks a query. So the user can ask any kind of query. So initially it was designed to be work only with the Alma archive. So the user could ask any kind of queries. So the one example would be the user ask, could you just show me all the list of the band 6 observation of M87 run by Alma? And then there is something called a Quasar agent, which classifies the intent of the question. So in this case, the intent of the question was to find a specific data. So the Quasar agent inside us, which is just another LLM, which then classifies the intent of the question. So, and once the intent of the question has been identified, and in this case it was to find some data, then it goes to the next session, which is a complexity assessment. So basically, like some of the questions can be like a multi-step questions, and some questions can be pretty simple. In this case, the question was pretty simple. All it had to do was to find the data. But in some case, the user could ask that maybe just find the data and tell me if some papers were published using those data, and if so, what were the conclusions of those papers. So in this case, there is a complexity assessment system which assesses the complexity of the question. So if the question is pretty simple, it would then route it to a dedicated agent that would just fetch the thing. But if the case is that the question is pretty complex and it needs to be break down into multiple steps, then the question is assigned to a conductor. And basically, what the conductor does is it breaks down into multiple steps, and it prioritizes and it gives a hierarchy to each step. For example, in the case that of finding the band 6 observation, and then finding the papers published on it, and then finding the what were the conclusions of that paper. So in this question, there is a clear hierarchy. You cannot kind of instantly fetch the paper without actually finding the observation. So the first step would be to find the observation. Then the second step would be to find the papers that use this observation. And the third step would be to find those specific papers and summarize them. So there is a clear order to do things. So what conductor does is it splits the question into three, assigns an order to them, and then deploys specialized subagents. And each subagent that's what it's good at. So there could be archive agent, which is only good at fetching data from archive. There could be a literature agent, which could be specialized in finding these papers from ADS or other sources. There could be analysis agent, which could be running some kind of Python code in a sandboxed environment to do some computation or generate some plots. So all these work in parallel. And and once they have all the input from these kind of specialized subagents, then the agent again synthesizes them into a final answer and reports us as a structured response. So this is basically the kind of the working principle in which Quasar works. But instead of explaining all this, I could just show you a few demo of like how Quasar work. And Quasar is actually available, and you can try it at this address, that quasarassistant.com. Please don't try it right now because it can handle only like 2, 3 queries at the same time. So if a few of you tried at the same time, that would crash. So maybe after the meeting, you could just go to this website and try a question of your own and see if it actually works. And actually, there is on the site. So I will just show you around what Quasar looks like and what each button and each thing is. So this looks pretty similar to all the chatbots or the ChatGPT kind of thing you have seen. There is obviously a web place where you can enter your prompt and ask your questions. And there is a plus button. So if you click here, you can upload your documents, images. So pretty similar to all the other chatbots you have seen. And there is like a few extra things. So by default, there is a web search enabled. So in that is, if you ask a question, it automatically searches the web too for the answers. And that can go even beyond the typical astronomy thing. So it can also search like other sources for answers. And then there is one more option called grounded mode. So the issue with this a simple web search is that it could also search other random websites and can also kind of inject irrelevant data or inaccurate data. So what grounded mode does it has already a list of websites it have in the mind that are approved. So if for example if there is some kind of information about ALMA and one of them is from a newspaper article and the other is from some official announcement from ALMA, it would prefer the answer from the ALMA over the other, and it would reject the other answers automatically. So that's what the grounded mode does. And if you look at the sidebar, if you expand it, you can see there is an option to choose different kind of models. So all these models under the tag Tejas option is kind of hosted at tag, and they're completely free to use and they're pretty fast. So we have a very limited amount of models available at the moment, Rom, but we are working on getting like more and more models. And then there is like a few options, like if you go to the settings. So one thing with Quasar is it kind of has its own memory system. So for each user, it kind of learns their patterns, it kind of learns their important things. So if I'm someone who keeps constantly asking it questions only on like let's say a band 6 or a band 7 or a specific band, it understands that the next time you say M87 or M81, it understands that this guy prefers band 6 or band 7. So even without him saying that I want the band 6 or band 7, it would automatically fetch you the band 6 one. So if at that time you didn't want at band 6, you could then just ask it again. So what this personalization or the personal knowledge base does is, if you have some kind of personal request or some kind of documents or so basically similar to what the Claude MD does. So if you have kind of any set of specific instruction, you could upload it here and it would adhere to those rules. And if you have any kind of specific data sets or folders, you could upload it here. And this would then vectorize that into a RAG and then store it there. So you could query it anytime. And if you don't want to use the provided LLMs, you could then connect your own API key and you can use your own model with this harness. So that's basically it. So to just show you a sample question, I will just ask you a sample question. So this thing is something I'm really afraid of because every time I try to show you a sample question, there is something wrong with Quasar, but I hope it goes pretty well this time. So I will start with a simple question. So the question is, what is the ALMA proprietary period? And I'll just click enter. I hope it works. Yeah, it did. Okay, so it's still waiting for the answers from the websites. Yeah. So it worked as intended. So if you ask a question, it summarizes all the things, and also it gives you link to all those pages where it found relevant data. So some of the details here it actually found from the website. So it would give you a link to actually find those papers or details from the website it found it. And let's try a different kind of question, not just a simple search question. Okay, so the other thing is like if you have looked carefully, there is an option called show query. So whenever it calls a tool or whenever it uses some kind of tool or does an operation, So for example, if it does a SQL query and found the data from Alma Archive, it would show you the exact SQL query it used to find that data. So you could just copy paste that SQL query and try it on your own or modify that query and see if it's actually correct. So every time it uses a tool or something, it actually shows you the exact query or the exact web address it used to find that data. So this is just few examples. So I have added a recipe gallery with a ton of questions I have tried with Quasar and that worked. So if you want, you could go to this recipe gallery and click on these questions and try them yourself and see the kind of questions Quasar can answer. And we're still kind of trying to get it more polished and more working with different kind of archives and different kind of questions. And also feel free to make any suggestions. So here there is an option to like upvote and downvote the answers. So when you downvote, it shows an option to report a problem. So if you feel that some of the answers are not really accurate or are not really the best, you could just write what was the problem or what was the issue and send the report. So as soon as I get the report, I will read through it and try to fix the issues. So after this, please go ahead to this quasarassistant.com, try a bunch of questions from the recipe gallery to get an idea about what kind of questions Quasar can handle, and maybe try your own questions which are completely different from them, and tell me how could Quasar improve and what all things Quasar could introduce. So that's it. Thank you.